Hi, my name is Lorenz. It's a lot like Lorenzo without the O at the very end. You might notice that this is the first video on this channel, and the reason for that is because I have a lot of friends who said that if I had an outlet to unload all my Disney knowledge onto, they would be in support of that, whether it was a podcast or a blog or something, and I thought, why not do a YouTube channel? Because I'm a film major, so why not work with the camera and an editing suite that I just bought a couple days ago? So a little bit about me. I am a film major, and I'm complete Disney trash if you haven't noticed by everything around me. And I completed the Disneyland college program last August, so spring 2018. That's the program I did. And in that program I was DCA custodial. Like I said, Disney trash. More about me. I'm a huge fan of Toy Story. If you can't tell by Woody, Buzz, and Jessie sitting in the back with the rest of the Toy Story gang there. And I just love Toy Story. I loved the first two movies when those came out, even though I wasn't even born when the first one came out. But like all children of the late 90s, I loved those movies. I remember watching Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, and the first one was my favorite movie for a long time, and the only reason it stopped being my favorite movie was because Toy Story 3 came out. That movie is actually the reason I'm a film major today. And so for us Toy Story fans, there has been some exciting news this past week, because the trailer for the fourth movie finally dropped. I kind of get asked, how do you feel about Toy Story 4 a lot, especially since I'm a big fan of the third movie. And if you'd asked me back in 2015, I would have been upset, because I remember seeing the poster for it at the 2015 D23 Expo, and I kind of shook my head. But then later that weekend of the Expo, they announced some of the details. That number one, the story was the search for Bo Peep. Number two, the co-director, and now he's the director, period, was Josh Cooley, who is the head of story on Inside Out, which is hailed as one of Pixar's best movies. And then the third thing that kind of brought me around, I thought about it, and I realized that this was coming 9 years after Toy Story 3, which is kind of similar to how Toy Story 3 came 11 years after Toy Story 2. And I thought, if Pixar really wanted to milk the success of Toy Story, I feel like they would have done it a lot quicker. I feel like this video would be about how Toy Story 4 would have sucked as compared to how cautiously optimistic or worried or excited that we all are for it. Anyway, no matter how you feel about it, a new trailer has recently come out, and it's kind of swayed the opinion of a lot of people who were worried about it, because it was just a really good trailer. A lot of cool things in this trailer, but there was one that I want to talk about, and that one that I want to talk about is this guy. He might be familiar to more longtime Disney fans, but for all you casual fans out there, this guy is the protagonist of an early Pixar short called Tin Toy. And in Tin Toy, the Tin Toy himself, Tinny, say that 5 times fast, is a new toy in this room. And he's excited to be played with because he's a new toy. And he's excited up until he realizes that Billy, his new kid, is... It was 1980 CGI. Anyway, this baby plays with toys like all babies do. They kind of just shake them around, and they're not very good with toys. And of course, Tinny is fearing for his life, so he starts running around the room, and Billy, the baby, gives him chase, and Tinny ultimately goes to hide underneath a couch, where he finds the rest of Billy's toys just quivering in fear. So when Tinny comes out, Billy actually gets more interested with the shopping bag in the box that Tinny came in. And all the ugly 1980s CGI aside, it's actually a really cute and funny short. This short won Pixar an Oscar, and they kind of wanted to revisit the character of Tinny, so they were going to make him the star of this Christmas special for ABC called A Tin Toy Christmas. In the special, Tinny would have lived in this 1940s small toy store, and this toy store was this little mom and pop's operation, and Tinny wasn't selling very well, so unfortunately they had to put him into storage, and when they bring him out of storage 40 years later, he awakes in the present, or the 90s, and he finds that this toy store is this huge Toys R Us style emporium. R.I.P. Toys R Us. Every night when all the employees went home, all the toys would be free to come alive and just kind of have fun. And the interesting thing about this toy store is that every aisle in this store was like a different neighborhood. And every night they would have been visited or actually raided by this bitter group of bargain bin toys led by an evil teddy bear. Unfortunately, we don't know how the story ends because this Christmas special never got made. Although it never got made, Disney did contact Pixar a couple years later to revisit Tin Toy once again, but this time as a feature-length film. The story of this movie would have been Tinny getting lost on a road trip, and he has to find his way back to his owner, and he does so with the help of his companion, who just so happens to be a talking ventriloquist dummy. When they were making this movie, they thought that the idea of a tin toy was just kind of outdated, so he was reworked into an action figure that went through a couple different names, and they ultimately settled on the name of none other than Buzz Lightyear, Space Ranger. And of course, with him as an action figure, there was still the ventriloquist dummy. And while they did like the idea of him being a cowboy, they thought that the ventriloquist dummy was still kind of an outdated thing in the 90s. So, of course, he turned into Sheriff Woody. These two became one of the most iconic duos in Disney history, probably even film history, because their movie was the first full-length CGI animated feature, ever. Although you might be thinking that these two stole Tinny's thunder, don't feel too bad just yet, because literally Tinny walked so these two could fall with style. The presence of Tin Toy has been felt throughout all of the Toy Story movies. You might remember that I mentioned a toy store where every aisle was kind of like a neighborhood. That idea was used in Toy Story 2 as Al's Toy Barn. You might even remember that I mentioned an evil teddy bear. He ultimately went on to become this bastard.
What would you like to do today?
Shut up. He didn't actually become Lotso Huggenbear. He actually kind of was Lotso Huggenbear to begin with. So that means he was planned for a 1980s Christmas special and wasn't used until a 2010 movie. So a good idea never really dies. In Toy Story 1, there is a series of picture books on Andy's shelf. Each of these picture books represents a different Pixar short film that was made at the time, complete with Tin Toy, written by John Lasseter. Oh, John. And if you remember the second movie, there's a scene where Ham happens to be flipping through the TV channels, and Tinny actually appears in a brief flash. My favorite reference to Tin Toy in any of the movies so far is in Toy Story 3, where Rex is anxiously awaiting to get played with, and you can see this group of toys quivering underneath a desk the same way that a group of toys was quivering underneath the couch in Tin Toy. And that was a really clever way to foreshadow to longtime Pixar fans, hey, the kids that they're about to get played with aren't so nice to them. That leaves us with Toy Story 4, the final Tin Toy reference in what may very well be the final Toy Story movie, in which Tinny finally inhabits the same space as the rest of the toys. In his scene, he's welcoming Woody and Bo. I don't have Bo Peep yet, but just imagine that she's in my hand. But I'm finally going to get her this summer, so there's that. Anyway, he welcomes Woody and Bo into what looks like to be this little dance party for toys, so we've got that to look forward to. And it's a cool Easter egg regardless of his history, but when you know his history, that's going to make it that much cooler when you actually see it in the movie, or actually even just go back and rewatching the trailer. And, it's just a cool little connection that definitely brings everything full circle, and it ties it back to the very beginning, and it shows how far Pixar has come as a studio. And I think it's a really cool connection. I hope you do too. And that said, thank you so much for listening to me ramble about this obscure bit of Pixar trivia, and hopefully I'll see you real soon.